Welcome back. At more or less the same time that Aisha was marrying Muhammad, Wu Zetian was born into a relatively modest family in Lizhou in modern-day Sichuan province, China. Her father worked in the timber business and the family was relatively well off and well connected. Her mother was from the powerful Yang family, distant relatives of the ruling imperial family. Wu was encouraged by her parents to read books and pursue her education, which was unusual given that society at the time held to Confucian ideals that emphasized loyalty, family hierarchy, and the subordination of women. She learned about music, calligraphy, literature, history, politics, and other governmental affairs, and showed an aptitude for learning, earning her a reputation for intelligence and sharp wit. This education set her apart in a world where women were largely relegated to domestic roles. At 14, she was taken to be an imperial concubine of the Emperor Taizong, and she became a kind of secretary, which allowed her to continue her education. The imperial palace must have been a very different environment to what she was used to. It housed elaborate courts, exquisite gardens, and an array of servants, and it presented both a new set of challenges and an opportunity. Emperor Taizong was known for his enlightened rule, but he was still a man of his time, enforcing a patriarchal structure within both the state and the family. Despite this, Wu's unusual education served her well. Through her intelligence and charm, she caught Taizong's attention, not easy to do amongst so many concubines. There's a story that Taizong had a new horse which hadn't yet been broken in, and he asked Wu Zetian how she would handle it. She replied, first with an iron switch, then with an iron rod, and finally with a dagger to its throat, revealing a nice balance of pragmatism and psychopathy. Taizong was charmed. When Taizong died in 649 CE, Wu Zetian became a nun, which was the usual career path for concubines whose emperors had died and who had produced no sons. She was just 25, and as far as everyone else was concerned, this was the effective end of her career. And for most concubines, that would have been the end of the story, but not for Wu, obviously. To understand why, we have to go back a few years. The lives of the Wu family, and Wu Zetian in particular, were closely intertwined with three emperors: Gaozu, his son, the Emperor Taizong, and Taizong's son, the Emperor Gaozong. Before he became emperor, Gaozu stayed in the Wu household many times and became close to the family. When he became emperor, he rewarded the Wus by giving them grain, land, clothing, and wealth, and by giving Wu Zetian's father a succession of senior ministerial posts. As I just mentioned, Wu Zetian was called to the palace at about 14 years old and became a kind of mid-level concubine to the new emperor Taizong, doing mostly secretarial work. Mostly. At this time, Taizong's son, the future Emperor Gaozong, was about 9 years old. Considering what was to happen later, it's reasonable to assume that young Wu Zetian made a great impression on young Gaozong. So Taizong dies in 649 and Wu Zetian is packed off to a convent. Now, this sounds bad, and it is, but it's not as bad as it could have been. Previous emperors had been buried with concubines who'd failed to give them sons. So by comparison, life in a convent was a pretty good deal. Wu stayed in the monastery for 2 years until Gaozong came calling. Gaozong was still captivated by her beauty and her intellect, and only too happy to seek the company of the now available Wu. He brought her back to the palace as a concubine, but with a promotion to a level just below his official concubine Zhao and the Empress Wang. As she navigated her new role, Wu began to consolidate her position. The depth of her political acumen and her ambition became increasingly evident as she began to act not only as a consort, but also as an advisor to the emperor. Gaozong was inexperienced and frequently incapacitated with a sickness that caused him spells of dizziness, and at first seems to have been very happy to rely increasingly on Wu. By the 660s, Wu's influence had grown to the point that she effectively displaced her rivals, more senior consorts who had originally occupied the higher ranks within the emperor's affections. One of her most notable moves in this path to power involved the defamation of her chief rival, the Empress Wang. Now, in 654, Wu gave birth to a daughter who died shortly after birth, with evidence, in very large inverted commas, suggesting that the child had been strangled. The evidence, such as it was, included allegations made by Wu that the Empress Wang committed the murder. Wu convinced Gaozong that Wang, jealous of the fact that Wu had provided a child when Wang had been unable to do so, had murdered the baby. Was this the case? Honestly, who knows? There are stories that Wu killed the child herself as part of a plot to frame the Empress, which fits nicely with a narrative that Wu was power hungry and would stop at nothing to get it. It's certainly possible that Wang, motivated by jealousy, really did kill the baby. But of course, it's equally possible that the child died of what we would now call sudden infant death syndrome. Remember, this is the 650s, poorly ventilated rooms heated by coal fires, and it could just as easily have been carbon monoxide poisoning. Whatever the truth, the emperor believed Wu and was furious, wanting to depose Wang and replace her with Wu. But Wang was the empress, and he needed to be sure that he had the support of his government chancellors, which he didn't, so the empress stayed for now. Meanwhile, possibly seeing which way the wind was blowing, a group of high-ranking officials began to form around Wu, providing her with further support. When, the following year, in the summer of 655, Wu accused Wang of witchcraft, their support was enough to tip the balance. This time, Gaozong deposed Wang and installed Wu as empress in her place. Later the same year, Gaozong started to have second thoughts and showed signs of considering Wang's release, so the new Empress Wu had her killed. There was to be no going back. On the political front, Wu began to influence appointments in government. She strategically placed allies in positions of power, ensuring a network of support across the empire. Her endorsement of capable officials showcased her judgment regarding governance. Perhaps because of her own upbringing, she recognized the importance of education and meritocracy and promoted officials based on ability rather than their noble birth. In 660, Emperor Gaozong began to suffer from painful headaches and loss of vision, and began to have Empress Wu make rulings on daily petitions by officials. By 664, however, Wu was so involved in the empire's governance that she was angering Gaozong with her controlling behavior. He consulted his chancellor, who suggested that he depose Wu. He had the chancellor draft an edict to do so, but Wu heard about what was going on and went to the emperor to plead her case. Gaozong couldn't bear to depose her and blamed the whole episode on his chancellor, and so Wu had him executed. In late 683, Gaozong died and Wu became Empress Dowager and Regent. Gaozong's will stated that Li Jie, Wu's third son, should ascend immediately to the throne, but that Empress Wu should claim senior authority in the empire for herself. And so, in the second month of 684, Li Jie ascended to the imperial throne for 6 short weeks. The new emperor was married to a woman of the Wei family. Because Li Jie was as weak and incompetent as his father, the new empress sought to place herself in the same position of great authority that Empress Wu had enjoyed. It'll come as no surprise that the Empress Wu was having none of that and deposed Li Jie, installing as emperor her youngest son, Li Dan. He was emperor in name only. Wu was the absolute ruler in both substance and appearance. She didn't follow the customary pretense of hiding behind a screen or a curtain and issuing whispered commands for her son to announce. No, her reign was fully recognized and there for all to see. Li Dan never moved into the imperial quarters or appeared at imperial functions and remained a virtual prisoner in the inner quarters. He held the title of emperor, but Wu firmly controlled the imperial court and officials were not allowed to meet with him, nor was he allowed to rule on matters of state. it was solely to Wu Zetian that officials reported. Not surprisingly, she suspected many of those officials of opposing her, so she had mailboxes installed outside imperial government buildings to encourage the people of the realm to report secretly on others. Wu personally read all the reports, and secret police officials began to carry out systematic false accusations, torture, and executions. In 690, 7 years after the death of her husband, Wu took the final step to become the emperor of the newly proclaimed Zhou dynasty and took the title Huangdi, despite the fact that the traditional Chinese order of succession did not allow a woman to ascend to the throne. Wu was determined to quash any opposition, and the early years of her reign were characterized by her use of the secret police and on a system of spies, eliminating many of her real, potential, or perceived rivals through execution, through suicide by command, by demotion, or by exile. She used informants to choose people to eliminate, a process that peaked in 697 with the wholesale demotion, exile, or killing of various aristocratic families and scholars, and the prohibition that their sons be forever excluded from holding office. 697 also saw the death of Lai Zhenchen, one of her top enforcers. Now, Lai is worth taking a quick look at because it gives you a flavour of what Wu Zetian was like as a ruler. Lai was described as vicious and unprincipled, even as a boy, and came to favour with Wu by submitting secret reports to her exposing alleged traitors. Wu made him deputy imperial censor, a role that gave him authority to do pretty much whatever he wanted in the service of his emperor. It was an authority he exercised with relish. He recruited hundreds of thugs to submit false reports against enemies, actual and possible, of the emperor. He was so good at this that he literally wrote the book on the subject, the Manual of Entrapment, which was a guide on how to fabricate charges and extract confessions. And extract confessions he did, using some truly horrible torture methods. His investigation bureau was situated at Luojing Gate in Luoyang and became known as the Gate of Certain Death. 99% of people who went in never came out. Wu Zetian certainly knew all this, and she twice shielded him from corruption charges, but he was useful to her. The atmosphere he created meant no official felt secure enough to organise opposition. Any wealthy family could be dispossessed at will to fill the state coffers, and the threat of arbitrary arrest and almost certain death stifled any possible dissent. It's estimated that Lai destroyed over 1,000 families on Wu's behalf, until he reached a family he couldn't destroy: Wu's. In 697, overreaching himself, he accused the emperor's children of plotting against her, which could have been true. They appealed to Wu, who, realizing that Lai was now turning his sights on her family, the way he had hundreds of other families before them, decided that he was no longer useful and took immediate action. He was arrested and decapitated. Contemporary reports say that citizens, long terrorized by Lai, descended on his body and ate it. Wu overhauled the censorate and disbanded the investigations bureau, replacing it with a structure that meant it was no longer possible for one single bureau to exercise such unchecked power. As a woman from outside the Li family, the founders of the Tang dynasty, Wu needed an alternative power base, and she found this in the imperial examination system. Reform of imperial exams featured prominently in her plan to create a new class of elite bureaucrats, derived from humbler origins like her own. Both the palace examinations and the new military examinations created under Wu were based solely on merit and contained an assessment by Wu herself, allowing her to personally select the people she wanted and giving her a power base of military and governmental leaders loyal to her. It was around this time, at the age of about 73, that Wu began relationships with two brothers in their late 20s, Zhang Yiji and Zhang Zhangzong, who were ultimately to be her downfall. As Wu grew older, the Zhang brothers became increasingly powerful, and she relied on them more and more to handle affairs of state. This was secretly criticised by palace officials, including Wu's grandson and granddaughter, but somehow the discussion was leaked and reported to Wu, and she ordered them to kill themselves. In autumn 704, accusations of corruption began to be levelled against the Zhang brothers, but even though officials advocated that they be removed, Wu refused and charges of corruption continued despite her intervention. In winter of 704, she became seriously ill, and only the Zhang brothers were allowed to see her. This led to speculation that they were plotting to take over the throne, and accusations of treason were added to the accusations of corruption. Although her conditions improved, Wu still refused to allow anyone but the brothers to attend to her. By spring 705, Wu was seriously ill again. This time, Wu's chancellors and advisors acted directly. Convincing the army to be involved, on 20th of February 705, they killed the Zhang brothers and surrounded the hall where Wu was living. They forced her to yield the throne, and on 23rd of February, Li Xian took the throne, ending the Zhou dynasty after only 15 years and one emperor, and restoring the Tang dynasty. Wu died in December of that year at the age of 81. In thousands of years of history, China's only female emperor. The transition from Wu as a consort to her self-proclamation as emperor encapsulates the remarkable transformation of her identity and the breadth of her ambition. Declaring herself emperor, she not only shattered gender conventions but also challenged the deeply patriarchal structure that had prevailed for centuries. And while she could be vicious, she had many of her own family members executed. She was not a bad emperor, all things considered. Many of her policies were popular and helped gain support for her rule. She was fortunate in that she came to power during a time when the people were generally content, the administration was well run, and the economy was doing well. But as far as most people were concerned, Wu kept that going. It's one thing to inherit a good situation, it's quite another to maintain it, and she did that. She was determined that farmers should continue to work their own land, so she ensured fair land allocations and reallocated land where necessary. And she issued various edicts which helped satisfy the needs of the lower classes through various acts of relief, her widening of recruitment to government service to include commoners, and her generous promotions and pay raises for the lower ranks. Wu Zetian's rise to power demonstrates this blend of intelligence, ambition, and strategic brilliance. Her journey from minor concubine to the Emperor of China didn't happen by accident. It was the result of a series of calculated decisions, alliances, opportunism, and ruthless determination. Her story illustrates that remarkable women can and do shape history, often in ways that defy the limitations placed on them by societal norms, which view women often as inferior to men. Legal and cultural frameworks explicitly defined women's roles in relation to men, be it as daughters, wives, or mothers. Often records of the time in China don't even bother to record the names of women. They simply weren't seen as important enough. As a female leader, Wu faced rampant misogyny and criticism, exacerbated by her assertion of power in a male-dominated hierarchy. Confucian ideology dictated that a woman could not hold such authority. So at the start, her reign was often legitimized through her relationships with male counterparts, particularly by framing her rule as a continuation of her husband's legacy. She promoted Buddhism, possibly because of an affair she was rumoured to be conducting with a senior Buddhist monk, but which she used as a political tool to garner broader support among the population. By framing her rule within a religious context, she was able to bolster her image as a benevolent leader, which was crucial to her acceptance in a patriarchal society. But through her own merit, Wu Zetian proved to be an exceptionally capable ruler, surrounding herself with competent officials, many of whom were scholars, and her reign is marked by achievements in bureaucracy and administration, as well as its focus on economic prosperity and stability. She implemented agricultural reforms, improved irrigation systems, and enhanced grain production, which yielded significant benefits to the empire. Her position was constantly under threat from male rivals who questioned her legitimacy and depicted her as manipulative and untrustworthy. Propaganda was employed against her, including art and literature that vilified her. Various historical texts, like the Old Book of Tang, detailed accusations of tyranny and moral corruption, portraying the image of a woman whose power was unnatural. Such depictions were not uncommon, as women in positions of authority have historically been subjected to scrutiny that male leaders often evade, or held to a simply different standard. Her relationship with the Jiang brothers, for instance, was viewed as a scandal at the time and by historians. But had Wu been a man and the Jiang's women, would it still have been such a scandal? Did she do anything in the pursuit of the throne that a man hadn't done previously, or wouldn't do again in the future? No. But as a woman, she faced criticism that men didn't. In recent times, historical re-evaluations have begun to reclaim her image, portraying her as the complex, multifaceted leader that she was, rather than merely the tyrant she'd been branded. Nevertheless, the image of a woman donning the imperial robes must have been a shock, challenging contemporary understandings of female power and authority. It's a reminder that history is often written not just by the victors, but also by those courageous enough to defy the odds and current convention. But what Wu believed, rightly or wrongly, she had to do to retain power came with a price. The fear she instilled led to an oppressive climate in the court, fostering resentment and alienating potential allies. By 705, her power was precarious, and when she abdicated, the very forces she fought against were galvanized, leading to a swift reversal of her policies and a restoration of male hegemony. There would never again be a female emperor. Join me next time as we look at the life of Fatima al-Fihri, the founder of the world's oldest existing, continually operating degree-granting university. Maybe. But for now, thank you very much for joining me. Please remember to feed the algorithm by liking, sharing and subscribing on your way out, and whatever you're up to. Until next time, have a great day.